welcome to IWASE-SAN'S table. Wait a moment. We have code 3. Yeah, BR61661 reports to pressing headquarters. It says, code 3, repeat, code 3. I remember the last time Ray McCoy received a code 3, as he remembers it, somebody had thrown up on Brian's desk, and he ended up leading the cleanup. Not exactly the glamorous life you would expect from a Blade Runner, isn't it? But that was Ray McCoy, and that was also one of the things I loved about him most. Blade Runner could show you replicants, flying cars, enormous corporations, and questions about the nature of consciousness. And 5 minutes later, remind you that somebody had to still clean up the police station. Blade Runner is a universe that I have always kept very close to my heart. From the original movie with Harrison Ford as Deckard, to the incredible 1987 PC game by Westwood Studios, the animated shorts Blade Runner 2049, and eventually something I have wanted to exist since I was a teenager. A Blade Runner role-playing game. Yeah, with dice, with your own character customization. Something I have wished for a long time. So this is when it comes to my hands. The Blade Runner role-playing game. So let's go back to the beginning. Before we begin, we need to understand what happened before Deckard, before Ray McCoy, and before anyone asked whether the person across the table was actually human. By the beginning of the 21st century, the Tyrell Corporation had pushed artificial life beyond anything seen before. Their Nexus 6 replicants were almost impossible to distinguish from humans, and in many ways physically superior to their creators. But they weren't created to live normal lives. Replicants became workers, soldiers, and laborers in the off-world colonies, doing jobs humans couldn't or simply didn't want to do. Then something happened. A group of Nexus 6 replicants rebelled. After that, replicants were prohibited on Earth. Returning illegally could mean death, and special police units were created specifically to find them. Those officers become known as Blade Runners. When a Blade Runner killed a replicant, the language changed too. They didn't call it execution, they call it retirement, as with any other old machine. And I think that choice of word already tells us a lot about the world, the universe we're about to enter. Part 1. A little bit of history. Blade Runner didn't actually begin with Blade Runner. In 1968, Two Androids Dream of Electro Chip was published, introducing us to Rick Deckard, bounty hunter living on an Earth devastated by war and environmental collapse. Much of humanity has already left for the off-world colonies. Real animals have become incredibly rare and expensive, and Deckard makes his living hunting escaped androids. And notice this when I mention androids, because that would be a difference. And I think it's important to begin with the novel because even if the movie later changes many things, a lot of the questions that eventually became Blade Runner are already there. Empathy, identity, the need to own something real in a world increasingly filled with artificial things. The strange idea that we can actually create a test to determine whether somebody is a human while the humans themselves are sometimes behaving in ways that make that distinction increasingly uncomfortable. That is something to think of, especially at the date when Philip Dick has written these two Android dreams of electroship. And also, coming to think about Deckard is also very different from the almost mythical image we sometimes have of the Blade Runner overall. In the book, he's a bounty hunter, and money matters to him. His job is dangerous, but at the same time, he has completely ordinary problems waiting for him at home. He wants things that he can afford. He has problems in his relationships. He worries about his social position. He dreams about owning a real animal because in that society, having one means something. And actually, you came to think of this. It does matter to you that if you have an animal, if you have a pet, someone to trust. So the idea of Philip Dick wasn't too far away from the current reality we are all facing, especially with AI. And I will be skipping a little bit forward, but thinking about the movie 2049, how even Nexus 9 needed someone, that actually matters. And that is something I personally connect with much more than the futuristic technology. You can survive something incredibly dangerous and dire at work and still come home to bills, frustration, responsibilities, and all those small things that doesn't disappear simply because you had an extraordinary day, or maybe you haven't. They are all still there, waiting to chase your dreams. And that's how the car sometimes emphasize and I highlight how it actually feels a little bit like me. A man trying to control the few things he can control while everything around him keeps getting bigger and more complicated. He solves one problem and another one appears behind it. He takes an enormous risk because he actually needs the money. The reward never really seems proportional to what the shop is asking from him. Isn't that the reality of many of us, actually? So we can find ourselves in this kind of characters. They are very close to reality, even if they actually live in a dystopic futuristic society. That kind of desperation there that feels so surprisingly familiar. Obviously, most of us aren't hunting artificial people through radioactive city or the people. At least I hope not. But that feeling of constantly trying to solve something while another 10 problems are waiting behind it, I think most of us understand that perfectly well. Then in 1982, Ridley Scott's Blade Runner movie transformed that world into something visually completely different. Harrison Ford becomes Deckard, the bounty hunter becomes a Blade Runner, the androids become replicants, the Rosen Association becomes the title corporation. San Francisco becomes Los Angeles. Many elements from the novel either change dramatically or disappear almost completely, especially for the whole thing of being a movie, more action like mercerism, For example, which is extremely important in the book, becomes almost irrelevant in the movie. The obsession with owning real animals is reduced. Descartes' personal life changes enormously. So, these are actually a few of the changes we have seen um, between comparing movie against the book, the original book. Okay, but also at the same time, uh, the movie takes other ideas and pushes them much further. Memory becomes enormously important. Identity becomes strongly important as well, and the replicants themselves become much more emotionally central to the story. Then there is Los Angeles, the rain, the darkness, all those landscapes we have seen in the original movie, the mega big buildings disappearing into the smog or the pollution of the air, the neon signs that actually, whenever you look at that, you know where you are in a dystopic, futuristic fantasy. And the advertising as well. People speaking different languages in the streets that somehow feels completely overcrowded and incredibly lonely at the same time. Those are the contrasts that makes the movie a great movie and manage to immerse you into feelings of the play runners, the normal people, and even the replicants. So for me, the most interesting thing was never simply how beautiful that world have become or how it look, how beautiful it look. What it was beautiful actually for me uh, was what was happening inside it. And I'm not just talking about the world itself. I'm talking about everyone, replicants and Blade Runners included, and also the movies extras or NPC movies. Because the replicants were created for a purpose. They were given a limited existence before their lives had even begun, and everyone simply expected them to accept that, just like that. And what if they didn't? What if they wanted to live more time? Or they wanted to know why they were created? And also, at the same time, continue existing, surviving, have a family like anyone else, or a job that they like, study. Um, so in this case, I will bring to the front Roy Batty. He's actually asking for an empire or conquering the world. Um, he just wants to live. He wants to have his own memories. And suddenly, this person, Deckard, is supposed to be the hunter, also becomes somebody whose desperation I can also understand and align with. That's where Blade Runner becomes uncomfortable for me in the best possible way. I'm supposed to know where the line is. The car is supposed to know where the line is. There's even machine designed specifically to help determine where that line is. Of course, we are talking about the Voight-Kampff. And yet, the longer the story continues, the harder that line becomes to see or to be seen. I can understand the car, I can understand the Nexus 6, the movie, and I don't really feel any need to decide which side gives me the definitive answer of what is being a being. And actually, I think that's one of the reasons Blade Runner stayed with me for so long. It also allows the question to remain a question. But as important as the novel and the movie were for me, neither of them was the moment when Blade Runner truly became personal. For that, we have to move forward to 1997. The 1997 great, awesome video game. And why this is important? Because for the role playing game, this is a part that has become canon. So, to the whole history of Blade Runner, we have this clue and we have these events that happens only in the video game. And I truly recommend playing it if you have the chance. So, we have already watched the movie, we have already read the book, and we knew what Blade Runner was about. But again, in 1997, something had changed. That was the year Westwood Studios released Blade Runner for PC. And for me, that moment was very, very special. Is when you feel that this universe stopped being something that you simply watch or read about and become somewhere that you can really be transported to and get immersed on what was happening. You align with the characters, you understand their motivations, and that was a life changer for me. And I still remember that day I when I found the game. It was raining. It was really raining, rainy day, and my mother and I we went to a shopping gallery where I used to live at Flores here in Buenos Aires. And somewhere inside that shopping gallery that is still there today, but unfortunately there isn't that computer store anymore there. I saw the video game, Blade Runner PC game, 4 CDs. That is what I remember, and I still have it, of course. And I say, "Oh, look, mom, here is that movie I watch all the time. Remember?" And she say, "Blade Runner. That movie I have seen it is with Harrison Ford, isn't it?" Say, "Yeah, maybe it's Harrison Ford also too here playing as Deckard." Um, I wanted. I remember nagging my mom saying, "I want this game for my birthday." It wasn't even my birthday back then. And actually, I remember I didn't know what to expect out of the game. And actually, I was a little bit disappointed about movie licensed video games at that point. I remember all those old games of the family computer, console, or or Nintendo. The NES. Look, there is a game about Robocop or Terminator, and well, basically, it was a whole disappointment. We have seen that, and certainly couldn't have known that almost 30 years later, I will still remember that afternoon, the rain, the gallery, and those 4 CDs. And also the first time I played. And by the way, back in the day, we didn't have um, any options. You buy the game that was on at the store, and it came along with the language that you selected. And lucky or unlucky for me, Um, that first Blade Runner video game was not in English, was in Spanish. And actually, when you hear Clovis and you hear Sadie or Lucy uh, talking in Spanish, it gives you a reminiscence of all those authors, uh, of old school authors, poetry authors. And at least for me, it has its own, charm. So, as I was saying, somehow that memory stayed there. And maybe that's appropriate considering that considering the game we're talking about, because Blade Runner was already asking questions about memory, identity, and consciousness. But the video game made those questions personal for me in a way that the movie uh, couldn't do it. At least for the first time I watch it. And instead of playing Deckard, I play as Ryan McCoy, another Blade Runner investigating a completely different case, while the events of the movie were happening somewhere around him at the very same time. And I love that creative decision of Westwood Studio. That was awesome, knowing that, hey, maybe I have the chance and I, cross paths with Deckard. But actually, you cross paths with Gaff, which was some enough for me, at least back in the day, and still is. So Westwood could have simply tried to recreate the movie and let us play as Deckard, but they didn't. McCoy has his own story, his own personality, his own mistakes, and eventually his own doubts about himself and about the world that surrounded him. He could be sarcastic, sometimes a little bit cocky, sometimes naive. He felt fresh, younger, faster, perhaps a little bit more optimistic than how Deckard was. Deckard, at least when I watched the movie, um, felt to me like somebody who has already spent years carrying the weight of that war. And if we recall McCoy, he's almost brand new to the police department. So he feels more like somebody who is about to discover exactly how heavy that work can become. And because I was controlling him, his questions gradually became my own questions. Who should I trust? Should I perform the Voight-Kampff test to everyone I cross paths with? Should I arrest this person? Should I shoot this person? Should I let them go? Should I pull out the gun and threaten them? And perhaps the most important question of all, what if I'm wrong? And actually, there is no good or wrong answer to this, right or wrong answer to this. Um, you will discover if you get the chance to play it. So that uncertainty was one of the things Westwood built into the game itself. Some characters didn't necessarily have the same identity every time you played. Someone who had been human during the one playthrough might be a replicant during the other. Think about what that does to you as a player and the replayability of the game. You enter the second game believing you already know somebody or you actually know what to do next, and maybe you remember all the steps you did in your previous game, but you will notice the differences right away. So you have to trust your own guts, your own hunch uh, when becoming Ryan McCoy. And then the game tells you that your memory from the previous playthrough might no longer be useful. For a Blade Runner game, I think that was brilliant. And the game was effectively using my own memory against me. And the story could change in other ways too. Your decisions influence McCoy and could eventually lead towards several different endings with many variations depending on what you had done and the relationships you had created along the way. You could play him aggressively, you could sympathize with the replicants, you could follow orders almost mechanically, or you could gradually begin questioning exactly what those orders meant. And meanwhile, the world wasn't simply waiting for you. The characters used to move around the city independently. Things happened while McCoy was somewhere else. Somebody might leave a location before you arrive. An encounter could change because you visited one place before any other, and the city felt as though it continued existing even when I wasn't looking at it. And today, that might not sound revolutionary, but back in the day in 1997, it was awesome. It was incredible. And I almost like to describe it in this way. The game didn't simply remember what I was doing, it behaved as though the world itself had a memory. And then there was the technology. Looking at the game today, obviously, you can see its age immediately. The characters are pixelated, facial details is limited, and sometimes your imagination has to do quite a lot of work. But in 1997, I didn't care about it. The environments were built as detailed three-dimensional scenes and then pre-rendered, but Westwood filled those locations with movement, rain, smoke, advertisements, vehicles, reflections, changing lights. Then they use a volumetric character system based around voxels, so McCoy and the other characters could move through those environments in three dimensions. And the really important part was how all those systems interacted. Lighting affected the characters, shadows helped place them inside the environment, steam or fog could pass in front of them. McCoy didn't feel like somebody walking across a photograph. He felt like he belonged inside the world. And when you combine that visual technology with characters acting independently and a story that could change depending on your decisions, something very unusual happened. Uncertainty wasn't simply part of the story, uncertainty was part of the game engine. And then there were the philosophical questions. The game made me think about consciousness in ways I wasn't really prepared for that age. If somebody has memories, emotions, fear, love, and an understanding of themselves, what exactly makes that consciousness less valid because somebody created it? Or and what happens if memories themselves can be actually be manufactured? Can they actually be built and implanted into someone's brain? If I remember my mother, my childhood, the first person I love, or my first friends, the things that used to frighten me, and those memories produce real emotions inside me. Doesn't matter that those events originally happened to somebody else. The movie had already introduced that idea through Rachel and her implanted memories. But the video game made me spend some hours actually living inside that uncertainty. There is a line that you can always find from some of the endings that stay with me for years. And this time, the memories we create will be our own. This line, in particular, depending on the path that you take, Lucy or Dakota can say it. For years, I actually associated that line with Clovis too. And honestly, there's something beautifully appropriate about remembering a quote and unreliable memory incorrectly. Those ideas made me think about our own memories too. Not because I think deja vu or the Mandela effect proved somebody secretly implanted our childhoods into us, obviously not, but they make the same question interesting, right? How reliable is our memory? Two people can experience exactly the same event and remember it differently. Sometimes we're completely certain that something happened one way only to discover years later that it didn't. And if so much of what I call my identity depends on the story I remember about myself, what happens when the story changes? I didn't have an answer for that in 1997, and I think I still don't have it. And to be completely honest with you, I think I'm glad I don't. Because somewhere between the rain, the music, McCoy's apartment, the police station, the esper machine, the Voight-Kampff test, and all of those hours sitting in front of my computer, Blade Runner stopped being simply a movie that I love. It became one of those, well, actually not a movie, a video game, more or less, like a movie. Um, it became one of those words that somehow attaches itself to a period of your life. And whenever I think about it today, I don't only remember Deckard standing in the rain. I remember Ray McCoy. I remember those four CDs. I remember that shopping gallery. And I remember my mother walking there with me on a rainy day in 1987. Many years later, another question would appear. If Blade Runner could work this well as a video game, why wasn't there a role-playing game? And for that, we have to move forward a few years to the attic in 2001. A few years later, around 2001, I was in the attic of my parents' house where I used to live, playing role-playing games with my friends. And there I have the idea of why not play Blade Runner? But this thing for me started back in 2001 after having played Cyberpunk 2020, my Paul Smith's game, for a long time. So the idea of sitting around a table and creating stories inside a dark technological future wasn't something new to me. But Blade Runner kept bothering me, not in a bad way. I simply couldn't understand why there wasn't a role-playing game about it. The setting already had almost everything I wanted: detective, investigations, corporate power, violence, moral decisions, replicants, artificial memories, the Voight-Kampff test, a city where practically everybody could be hiding something or someone. It seemed almost designed to be played around a table. So eventually I did what probably many game masters did before an official game existed. I made my own. I created a character sheet, I printed it. I remember my dad arguing about how much ink I used to use for those prints that I did for the role playing games and the characters. I wrote also some very basic rules, and I tried to invent mechanics for the Voight-Kampff test. Players could be human or replicant, and I even started thinking about whether somebody should be allowed to play a character without knowing for certain which one they were, replicants or humans. Was the system balanced? Probably not. Was it professionally designed? Definitely not. But it worked, and it gave us a lot of fun hours playing it. More importantly, for a few hours, we could sit in the attic and feel we were inside the Blade Runner universe. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about role-playing games. Sometimes you don't need the perfect rule book. And in fact, most rule books discourage you to commit 100% to the rules. You need a few ideas, some dice, a group of friends willing to believe in the same imaginary place for a couple of hours, and somebody stupid enough to say, "Fine, I write the rules." In this case, apparently that person was actually me. But the idea of not knowing whether your character was human or replicant stayed with me because it immediately creates a different kind of role-playing problem. Usually when we create a character, we know more about them than anybody else at the table. We know where they come from, what they believe, what happened in their childhood, what they are hiding. But what happens if even that information isn't completely reliable? What if the game runner knows something about your character that you don't? What if that childhood memory you wrote on the sheet is absolutely real to your character, but that actually never happened to them? That sounded like Blade Runner to me. More than 20 years passed from this now, and eventually the official game has actually appeared. Blade Runner, the role-playing game that was released by Free League a couple of years back, 2023. And when I finally got the book not so long ago, it was on 2025, and I have it in my hands. There was something almost strange about seeing those ideas I had playing that attic suddenly presented as part of a real professional design game. And definitely that encouraged me to start creating my own world. Humans and replicants working inside the same system, memories that actually matter mechanically, the possibility of secrets about your own identity, the Voight-Kampff test, baseline testing, police procedure, investigations that can force the character to choose between what the department wants and what they personally believe is right. It was exactly the kind of Blade Runner role-playing game I had wanted to exist. But there was something else that immediately made me smile. Yeah, Ray McCoy was there. It was canon. And it blew my mind, actually, seeing that what usually doesn't happen, a character created for a specific video game becoming canon to the whole story and the whole universe of a universe that I actually love. And not necessarily every possible event or ending from the 1987 video game that would be almost impossible considering the way that it works, but McCoy himself had actually survived into this version of the universe. And for me that mattered most, because suddenly those afternoons I had spent with the Westwood game weren't simply part of some old licensed video game that everybody had forgotten. He happened, his world, his universe actually happened, and much later, material for the RPG will even bring him directly back into the setting. Maybe for somebody discovering Blade Runner through the RPG, that name doesn't mean very much. For me, it means those 4 CDs again. It means the rain, the shopping gallery, and sitting in front of my computer for hours trying to decide whether I trusted somebody or not. And now he was there, inside the same role-playing game I had wanted since I was a teenager. The game itself places us in 2037, 18 years after the war we saw in 2019, and 12 years before the events of Blade Runner 2049. And that choice of year is incredibly useful because we are standing in the middle of two futures we already know. The old war hasn't completely disappeared, the new one hasn't completely arrived. Replicants have returned legally to Earth. Wallace has introduced the Nexus 9. And perhaps the strangest change of all is that some of those Nexus 9's replicants can now wear a LAPD badge and work as Blade Runners themselves. Think about how strange that would be for somebody who has been in the department for years, or even for us that we watched the original movie. Maybe your character spent part of their career hunting replicants. Maybe they lost somebody during one of those investigations. Maybe they genuinely believe that replicants should never be allowed back on Earth. And now they arrive at work, and their new corner is won. For a role-playing game, that's fantastic, because the conflict isn't only outside the group, it can be sitting beside you inside the spinner. And the game doesn't really need to tell us what to think about that. It simply gives us the situation. What does the human officer think? What does the Nexus think? Do they trust each other? Do they eventually become friends? Does something happen during a case that destroys the trust? That's where the game starts becoming interesting to me. Now, not when the rules tell us what Blade Runner can actually do, but when the setting starts asking us what kind of Blade Runner we are willing to become. And before we can answer that, we need to understand exactly what Los Angeles has become by 2037. So now we finally arrive at the world we are actually going to play, Los Angeles 2037. And I think choosing that year was one of the smartest decisions in the entire game, because we're actually standing directly between two versions of what we can call Blade Runner that we already know. 18 years have passed since 2019, and Blade Runner 2049 is still 12 years away, so we know where this war is eventually going to. And actually, our characters doesn't. And I love that, because from their perspective, maybe things are actually getting better. Maybe the worst years are behind them. Maybe Wallace really has solved the replicant problem. Maybe humans and replicants can finally work together in peace. We know enough about the future to understand how dangerous that optimism can be. The game begins shortly after Wallace Corporation introduces the new Nexus line replicants on Earth, and for the first time the players can enter the LAPD Rep Detect unit either as humans or as replicants themselves. And to understand why that's such a dramatic change, we need to look very quickly at what happened between Deckard's time and ours. After the events surrounding the Nexus 6 generation, things didn't simply calm down. Replicant technology continued developing, Tyrell disappeared, and eventually the war reached the blackout of 2022. And that event fascinates me because it wasn't simply a blackout in the sense of everybody losing electricity for a few hours, or actually you calling the service of electricity to come to our house and fix everything. An enormous part of the war's digital memory has actually disappeared. All financial records, medical records, identity information, photograph databases, replicant registration information, a complete blackout of data. Think about what that means in a society already obsessed with identity and memory. Suddenly, the problem isn't whether one person remembers their past correctly. An entire civilization has lost pieces of its memory. After that, fear of replicants becomes even stronger. Production is prohibited. Surviving models disappear underground, and for years the official answer to the replicant problem is essentially that replicants should no longer exist on Earth. Then Wallace arrives. He becomes enormously powerful, acquires what remains of Tyrell's work, and eventually introduces the Nexus 9. And this is where our 2037 becomes so interesting. The Nexus 9 is presented as the solution. A replicant designed to obey, a replicant that can safely return to Earth, a replicant that can even work inside LAPD. Prelic describes the game specifically as beginning in 2037, shortly after Wallace debuts the Nexus 9, with human and replicant Blade Runners working within this new reality. Just imagine being an older human detective when that happens. So for years, maybe your job involved hunting replicants, maybe one killed somebody you knew, maybe you believed they should never be allowed on Earth again. And then one morning you walk into headquarters, and Holden introduces you to your new partner, a Nexus 9, with the same badge, same kind of authority, and same case as you have as a Blade Runner human. Maybe even the same gun. That alone gives us more role-playing material than 20 pages of random encounter tables. And LA itself has changed too. This isn't simply the city we saw in 2019 with a few extra buildings added. It's huge, dense, dirty, overcrowded, technologically astonishing, and socially exhausted at exactly the same time. The city is divided into sectors, and the core rulebooks give us several major areas where most investigators can take place. We don't need to memorize every street before playing. Actually, I think doing that will hurt the atmosphere. I want parts of LA that I don't understand. I want buildings where I have no idea what happens on the 73rd floor. I want streets where my character has never visited before, and I want lights in the distance without somebody stopping the game to explain exactly what company owns them. Mystery makes the city feel bigger, and the game understands that, and you will enjoy the game more. Sector 5 is particularly important because that's where LAPD headquarters and the Rep Detect unit are located. That home, professionally speaking, that's where you receive the case, argue with your superiors, analyze evidence, request resources, and eventually return with either answers or a very uncomfortable explanation for why you don't have them. Then other parts of the city give us completely different types of investigations. Entertainment districts filled with clubs, gambling, crime, and people who really don't want police asking too many questions. Industrial areas connected with biotechnology corporations and everything left behind by companies like Tyrell. Commercial sectors where enormous amounts of money exist besides people who have almost nothing. And Sector 12, LAX Spaceport, which I particularly like because actually any place built around people constantly arriving and leaving immediately creates stories. Maybe someone trying to escape Earth, or someone arriving under a false identity, some illegal cargo of reps, technology, guns, or whatever you want, a replicant hidden inside a shipment, someone who bought a ticket but never boarded, a body found in a container that supposedly arrived empty. You barely need to write in any part of the adventure. It's all there, made for you to take. The location starts writing it for you, actually. And we're not completely trapped inside downtown either. There are Areas beyond the central sectors, industrial zones, agricultural production, wastelands, abandoned territory, abandoned hospital places like the Bradbury, a huge hotel with lot of holes where actually serves as entry of the uninterminable and how we gonna say it, a non-stop rain. Places increasingly difficult to reach and even harder to survive in. But most Blade Runner investigations naturally bring us back toward the city. Unfortunately, we are detectives in a science fiction world, so we have spinners. Personally, I'm very happy that the game doesn't expect us or me to spend 30 minutes role-playing LA traffic. We get inside, we fly, we arrive, we talk, we investigate, we do a scavenge across the streets. But there's another detail I really like about the city in this game. LA isn't simply a map, it creates pressure. You're surrounded by millions of people and yet investigations can feel incredibly lonely. Every building contains hundreds or thousands of lives you know absolutely nothing about. Every advertisement is shouting at you. Every corporation wants something, and they want you to know about what they want. Everyone seems to be moving somewhere, and somewhere inside all that noise, all that smog, and contamination of the environment, one person knows why somebody died. Your job is to find them. The starter set even comes with a full map of LA in 2037, evidence handouts, crime scene material, and a time tracker which tells you immediately what kind of game this wants to be. You're not simply wandering around looking for encounters, you're working a case while time continues moving. And that's probably what I like most about this edition of Blade Runner 2037. Nothing feels settled. Humans don't completely trust replicants. Replicants are back, but aren't simply accepted. Older Nexus models are still somewhere out there, maybe scamming a rebellion that you can use in your stories. Corporations have enormous influence. Different groups want replicant freedom, restriction, control, or complete elimination. And the police are standing somewhere in the middle, trying to pretend that all of this can be managed with procedures and paperwork. Maybe it can, maybe it cannot, but that's our job. As game masters of Blade Runner 2037 or Blade Runner players. And there's something wonderfully uncomfortable about knowing that somewhere in this enormous city a Blade Runner might be searching for a replicant, while the Blade Runner sitting beside them is one. That's LA in 2037, a city full of lights, rain, contradictions, and people trying to decide what the future is going to look like. Now that we know we are going to live, we need to decide who we're going to be. Now we know where we are. It's LA 2037, so before talking about humans, replicants, attributes, or archetypes, I think the first thing we need to understand is which kind of character we want to be playing. For me, Blade Runner is much closer to stepping into a detective novel than a traditional RPG. We have a badge, a case, evidence, witness who might be lying, suspects who might be dangerous, and usually not enough time to understand what really happened. When I enter a room, I'm not looking for treasure. I'm asking why the glass is broken, why a photograph is face down, why the neighbor says they heard nothing, and which of those details actually matters. Los Angeles itself becomes part of that investigation. Rain on the windows, neon on wet streets, spinners overhead, advertisements everywhere, thousands of people around you, and somehow the feeling that you are completely alone. Everyone you meet is carrying something: money, problems, family, fear, addictions, ambitions, secrets, memories, and you usually meet them when something has already gone wrong. Somebody is dead, somebody disappeared, somebody is running, somebody is chasing someone or stalking someone, and now you're standing in their apartment asking questions. That's why I wouldn't begin the character creation by asking what's the strongest build is. I would like to ask what kind of detective I want to play. Maybe I have been doing this for 20 years already and I don't believe anyone the first time they speak. Maybe I'm still new enough to think every case has an answer. Or maybe I trust the evidence more than people, or people more than the evidence itself. Maybe I can also be an excellent at crime scene and terrible when somebody starts crying in front of me. So I'm not an empathetic person, or I might translate or project my own personality as a human being into my character. Detectives have routines, people they avoid at headquarters, superiors they trust, places where they always sit, stupid arguments with their partners inside the spinner. I think exhaustion belongs in the Blade Runner universe, but so does the humor. We don't need four people sitting in darkness whispering philosophical questions while sad synthesizer music plays for the entire session. Although, to be fair, we are probably going to do that occasionally. Then we get one of the most interesting choices in the game: human or replicant. Both can carry the same badge, but that badge may mean something completely different to each of them and have a simply different weight to each of them. Imagine a veteran human who spent years hunting replicants and now has a Nexus 9 sitting beside them as a partner. Maybe they don't trust them, maybe they are trying to, or maybe after enough cases they end up trusting that Nexus more than most humans they know. And for the Nexus side, what does wearing a badge mean? Pride? Proof that society is changing? Test a job? Or the constant knowledge that some people inside the department are waiting for you to fail, or to accuse you, or simply get rid of you? That's much more interesting to me than simply looking at numbers. The archetypes then give us different ways of surviving into the profession. The analyst trusts evidence, the city speaker understands the streets, the doxy understands people, the enforcer survives confrontation, the fixer knows favors as connections, the inspector keeps asking questions, and the schemer knows the rules sometimes bend. But none of those tells me the character personality. An analyst doesn't have to be cold, an informer doesn't have to be stupid, and an inspector doesn't have to become another Deckard. They are simply different answers to the same questions. How did this person learn to survive being a detective? And maybe the best stories begin when whatever they learn to trust suddenly stops working. The evidence contradicts itself, the informant lies, violence solves nothing, the favor isn't returned, or the answer finally arrives and it's something you wish you had never found. That's when the character really begins to appear, to surface or scratch the surface. Because we are not creating somebody to explore LA. We are creating somebody who has to investigate, who has to work, who has to imagine, and create the scenarios themselves. And when it's 3 in the morning, the rain hasn't stopped, the evidence makes no sense, your partner hasn't spoken for 20 minutes and somebody is lying, what kind of detective are you then? Once we know what kind of detective we are playing, the next question is how that character changes. And this one is one of the things I really like about this system, because advancement isn't simply a matter of collecting experience points until a number goes up. Blade Runner separates that growth into two ideas: promotion and humanity. Promotion is basically your relationship with LAPD, how well you're doing in your shop, how the department sees you, whether you're following procedure, solving cases, and proving that you can be trusted with more responsibility. Humanity isn't something much more personal. It's what's happened to you of the cases themselves, the relationships you build, the memories that become important, the decisions that cost you something, the moments when the shop stops being just a shop, so you can be doing extremely well professionally while becoming colder as a person, or you can make a decision that damages your career but feels completely right for your character. And that contradiction is exactly where Blade Runner becomes interesting. One of the things that was mostly interesting for me and is spoken about many times in the 1997 Blade Runner video game is, have you killed a human yet? That's a pretty common question coming from Gaff. And why that question? Because you can barely compare at simple sight who is replicant, who is a human. Maybe you can retire a human by accident and completely ruin your career, not to mention that you can end up in jail. So this is an icy ground, let's say. For me, the easiest way to remember is this: promotion is what LAPD thinks of your Blade Runner. Humanity is what the cases are doing to your Blade Runner. Promotion can give you professional advantages, access, resources, and new ways of doing your job, while humanity helps develop the character's actual abilities over time. And sometimes the game deliberately puts those two things against each other. Maybe your superior gives you a direct order, but following it means sacrificing somebody you believe is innocent. Maybe refusing costs you professionally changes something inside the character. For a Nexus 9, that can become even more uncomfortable, because the department isn't only evaluating whether you're a good detective, they are also watching whether you're behaving the way a replicant is expected to behave. So advancement here isn't simply about becoming stronger, it's about seeing that survives after enough cases, your career, your beliefs, your relationships, or maybe none of them exactly as they were when you started the game. If you want to understand why a Nexus 9 is wearing an LAPD badge is such a strange idea, we need to take a look very quickly at how replicants have evolved. The early Nexus models were already becoming more capable and independent, but Nexus 6 is where everything really exploded. Stronger, faster, highly intelligent, almost impossible to distinguish from humans, but deliberately given a 4-year lifespan. That limitation was supposed to solve the problem of emotional development and independence. It didn't. Then we get the models like Nexus 7, with implanted memories and the possibility of reproduction, and later Nexus 8, who could live as a natural lifespan. Suddenly, replicants weren't simply artificial workers with an expiration date anymore. They could survive, hide, build relationships, and imagine an entire life. And naturally, humans responded by finding new ways to control them. Registries, identification systems, hunting them down when they disappear. Then the blackout of 2022 destroyed an enormous amount of digital information, including records used to identify replicants. and after that, the fear gets even worse. Replicant reproduction is prohibited. Nexus 8 disappear underground, and for years the official solution is basically to remove them from society. But then Wallace changes the equation again. He takes control of Titan's technology and introduces the Nexus 9, a generation presented as safe because obedience has been built into them. And that's the part I found fascinating. Every previous generation had created a new problem. Intelligence created independence. Longer life created people who could build features. Memory created identity. Reproduction challenged the idea that replicants were simply manufactured things. So eventually the solution wasn't to make them less humans. The solution was to make sure they obey. And then, in 2037, somebody has the brilliant idea of giving one of those replicants a gun, a badge, and legal authority over other replicants, which is basically where our game begins. Welcome to 2037. Now, I am going to talk about one of the things I have mentioned many times before, which is the Voight-Kampff machine. And what I like most about it is that it isn't a lie detector as such. It's trying to measure involuntary emotional and physical reactions while the subject answers questions designed to make them uncomfortable. In other words, the machine is looking for something the person might not be able to consciously control. In 2037, it's already old technology, but it's still useful when you're dealing with older replicant models or somebody whose identity isn't clear. At the table, I wouldn't reduce this to I roll and now I know. The interesting part of all of this is that it's an interview in itself. You ask the questions, you let the suspect answer, let the room become uncomfortable, let everybody wonder whether that pause meant something or whether you're simply seeing what you expected to see. The test takes time, and that matters in an investigation. If you get an inconclusive result, you haven't simply failed a roll. You have spent part of your case sitting across from somebody who now knows exactly what you suspect them of being. So basically you're giving up your suspicions, and in a way you teach them how to hide it. And then there's the baseline test, which I think is even more disturbing in a different way. The Voight-Kampff is usually asking, what are you? The baseline already knows you're a Nexus 9. What it's really asking is, are you still behaving the way you're supposed to? That's a completely different kind of control. A replicant Blade Runner can investigate murders, carry a weapon, arrest people, and make decisions that can destroy lives. But the institution is also watching their emotional stability and checking whether they're becoming too independent. And mechanically, there's wonderful contradiction there. Failing that test can actually push the character towards humanity. You failed the examination designed to prove you're behaving like the replicant they expect you to be, and the game tells us that something more human might be happening inside you. For me, that is exactly how this system should work in the Blade Runner universe. The machine isn't interesting because it gives us an answer. It's interesting because of what the answer might cost. Memories are one of the things Blade Runner keeps coming back to again and again, so naturally the RPG gives them a real place in the character. During the creation, you can choose a key memory, one moment from your past that matters to you most, and it doesn't have to be something enormous or tragic, actually. It can be a person, a place, something somebody said, your dog, your cat, a day you still think about you for reasons you can completely explain. And I like that because in one way you personalize more your character, and you don't need to write 20 pages of backstory for the first session. Give me one memory that means something to the character, and I already have something I can use to your advantage or disadvantage, or even to increase the length of the story, or a special campaign for you. So when a case touches that memory, maybe through a person, a location, a smell, a song, or simply a situation that feels familiar, it plays that connection. Let it affect the way the character reacts. That's where the memory stops being something written on the sheet and becomes part of the story. And of course, this is Blade Runner, so there's always another question hiding behind it. What if the memory isn't actually yours? Maybe it was implanted. Maybe parts of it are wrong. We have seen this in the movie and even in the game. Maybe somebody deliberately changed the story you believe about yourself, but mechanically and emotionally, that doesn't suddenly make it meaningless. If the character remembers it, feels it, and built part of their identity around it, then it matters. That's what I find this so interesting. This is what I find it so interesting. The game isn't only asking what happened in your past. It is asking what happens when you or when the present starts challenging the story you've been telling yourself about who you are or telling to others. And sometimes the most dangerous clue in the entire investigation isn't something you find at a crime scene. It's something you suddenly recognize from your own memory. Regarding the promotion and humanity in the gameplay, we already talked about those ideas. So here I just want to explain how I will actually use them during the game. Promotion is the professional side. You gain it by doing your job well, solving cases, following procedure, and proving useful to the LAPD. And you can lose it when you ignore orders, create problems for the department, or make decisions your superiors doesn't appreciate. You can then use the promotion to improve your career, gain specialties, or sometimes get access to resources that make the investigation easier. Humanity works differently. You gain it through moments that affect the character personality, relationships, memories, difficult choices, emotional consequences, or situations where the person behind the badge becomes more important than the procedure. Humanity is what you eventually use to improve skills, so the character becomes more capable because of what they have actually lived through. And that's really the important part for me. Sometimes the same decision can be pushed with those two numbers in opposite directions. Maybe you can refuse an order because you believe someone is innocent, while the LAPD may hate that decision, so you lose the possibility of promotion, but the experience may strengthen your humanity and will make richer story for everyone. Or maybe you follow every instruction perfectly and your career improves, but something inside the character begins to change in another direction. And of course, that includes you as a player changing the way you communicate with others. So the easiest way to remember the system is still the same. Promotion is what the LAPD thinks of your Blade Runner. Humanity is what the cases are doing to them. You spend promotion to develop the professional side of the character, and humanity to develop their skills. And somewhere between those two things, your Blade Runner slowly becomes somebody different from the person you created at first, and the person who did the first case. Another of the important systems that this game has is the stress and resolve. And of course, being a Blade Runner means eventually the pressure starts getting to you. That's where stress and resolve comes in. I don't think of stress as mental hit points. For me, it's the accumulation of everything the character is carrying during the case. You have been awake too long. Somebody just pointed a gun at you. and the witness you were supposed to protect is dead. Your superior wants an answer, and you don't have it. Or you have just discovered something about yourself that you really didn't want to know. All those things can wear down your resolve, and this is where I immediately think about Holden interviewing Leon. At the beginning it's control, almost routine. Then just another test in the room. But then Holden keeps pushing and pushing and pushing, and the questions become more uncomfortable, more tense, the air is more dense, and suddenly the entire situation changes. That's how I like the stress in an investigation to be. Don't throw it at the players every 5 minutes. Use it when the emotional temperature of the scene actually changes. The official game is built around investigative play, existential drama, and difficult choices. So pressure works best when it grows naturally out of those situations rather than becoming constant background noise. And when I'm preparing a case, I like to think about 3 kinds of pressure: physical, investigative, and personal. Physical pressure is obvious: violence, danger, somebody following you, stalking you in the night, in a dark alley. Investigative pressure is different: time running out, evidence disappearing, a suspect escaping because of you choose the wrong location first, or data being erased. And personal pressure is probably my favorite: a case of touching a key memory, your partner getting hurt, discovering that somebody you trust lied to you, or realizing the answer you're looking for might not completely change who your character thinks they are. Eventually, a Blade Runner can simply reach the point where they can keep functioning normally, and I wouldn't treat that as punishment. Make it part of the scene. Let the character break, react, recover, and carry something from it. Afterward. Sometimes the most stressful moment in the Blade Runner universe isn't that you don't need a gunfight at all, but put 2 people in the same room, let one ask a question, let the other realize there's no safe answer, and Holden probably understood that a little too late. So, what does actually mean to be a Blade Runner? And what do we do once the case begins? So, this is where the game becomes much more than simply chasing replicants through the rain. You're a police investigator, which means the badge gives you access to things other people doesn't have: crime scenes, records, laboratories, warrants, surveillance, backup, informants, specialists, and people inside the department who can either help you or make your life considerably more difficult or impossible. The important thing is to use those tools like a detective, not like any adventurer waiting for the next fight. Look at the scene before touching anything. Ask what you know, ask what you want to take out of that, which highlights you want to take home and to the LAPD Rep Detection Unit, what you don't know, who benefits, who had the opportunity, and what evidence will actually prove your theory. Talk to witnesses, check records, compare statements, follow the money, revisit places when something stops making sense, and don't fall in love with your first hypothesis, because the moment you decide too early that you already know what happened is when usually the moment that the real suspect starts getting away. And that's probably the best advice I can give you as a player of Blade Runner universe. Build your own case. Catching somebody isn't enough. You need evidence. More like, the old Carmen Sandiego. Motive, witnesses, forensic results, surveillance, something that still makes sense after you leave the room. Sometimes you need to call someone, ask for a favor, work an informant, request support, or bend a rule just enough to keep moving. Or maybe if the case is too important, make a deal with maybe a Nexus 6 or a Nexus 8, let them go just to get some information. and beg and pray not to be discovered of what you did. But the department is watching you too, and every shortcut can come back later. The badge gives you authority, not immunity. So don't play the character as the toughest person in LA. Play them as somebody who knows how to investigate, how to use the people around them, when to push, when to wait, when to abandon a bad theory, and when a rule is worth breaking. Pulling the trigger may actually be the easiest part of the job. Proving why you pull it, that's the difficult part. And I think this is where Blade Runner really works for me as a role-playing game. Because after all the rules, the cases, the tests, the memories, and the investigations, what actually stays with me is how the characters change. Maybe you begin with an older human Blade Runner who spent years hunting replicants and genuinely believes they should never have been allowed back on Earth. Not a cartoon villain, not somebody who spends every scene shouting insults, but a competent detective with reasons, good or bad, for believing what they believe. Then the department gives this person a partner that is actually a Nexus 9. At first, maybe they doesn't trust them at all, but cases happen. They save each other's lives. They eat noodles after a terrible shift. They complain about Holden. They argue about music, and one day that human realizes they are lying in a report to protect the same replicant they would have arrested without hesitation a year earlier. Or maybe we go the other way. Maybe the human begins being sympathetic, and a case destroys that confidence. The Nexus can change too. I wouldn't start every replicant character with "I want freedom." Maybe they are perfectly happy with their purpose and their lives. They like LAPD. They believe Wallace created them for a reason, and then something small happens. A failed baseline. A Nexus 8, they were supposed to hunt, or maybe a virtual relationship. A song they keep listening to, or one night they are told to go home after their shift and instead they go somewhere else for no reason other than what they wanted to do originally. That's when the question becomes interesting. What do I want when nobody's telling me what I'm supposed to want? Or what do I believe, or what do I have to believe in? And if you let those changes happen naturally instead of deciding the ending before the campaign begins, the city and the cases will do most of the work for you. That's probably my biggest advice right now for you as a game master of Blade Runner universe. Don't make every story about whether somebody is human or replicant. Let there be corruption, disappearances, blackmail, organized crime, corporate espionage, ordinary murders, and people doing terrible things for completely ordinary reasons. Give the characters normal lives too. Let them be. Let the replicant love some ridiculous piece of music, or love someone, or love your ChatGPT in that war. Let the veteran detective have a hobby nobody expects. Give them an apartment, a neighborhood, somewhere they always eat, somebody they actually want to see after work, because if everything is darkness, eventually darkness stops meaning anything. We need those small pieces of life, so there's actually something to lose. And don't try to create another Deckard, another Kay, or another Ray McCoy. Give your character one belief, one fear, one person they care about, one memory they trust, put a badge in their hand, and send them into LA. Then apply pressure and see what survives or what not. Because after everything we talk about, maybe the most interesting question in the Blade Runner universe isn't whether the person sitting beside you, again, is what it is, or pretend to be. Maybe it's both of those options, or maybe you are willing to become before the case is over. That's Blade Runner, the role-playing game for me. not simply a game about hunting somebody, but a detective story, a true dark noir detective story with humor but with naturality, with pieces of your own life, identity, duty, fear, survival, and the strange things we do while trying to understand who we are. Sometimes solving the case may actually be the easiest part. The difficult part is deciding what you're going to do once you know the truth. Thank you very much for staying up to the end. Please click on the ring bell, subscribe, and give me a like. Thank you very much and have a good night or a good day. Bye bye.